Hello and welcome to the September version of the Modern Actuarial Challenges webinar. My name is Stefan Mathis and I'll be your presenter today. I will give probably just one more minute for other people to join and then we'll begin and we'll dive in. So until then, I do want to do a quick test and I'm going to see if I can share my screen. And I hope that one of the people who are already logged in can chat and let me know if you can see the screen sharing or if there are some issues with that. Can you see that shared screen? Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know. I'm going to continue to use that then for the shared screen, and we'll go forward in just another minute. Thank you. Well, hello, welcome. As I said before, my name is Stefan Mathis, and I am the Chief Product Evangelist for Slope Software. And I'm pleased to be with you today to present what we're calling the Modern Actuarial Challenges webinar. Just as a little bit of a history, this is something that we decided we wanted to present and talk to the actuarial community about. We're going to do this regularly, not just today, but then probably in another 2 months, and then 2 months after that. This is the second time we've hosted this webinar. In between when we host this presentation type seminar or webinar, we also have an open discussion forum for actuaries across the world to come together and talk about some of these modern challenges and the ways that they are trying to uh, deal with those specific challenges. So welcome to the folks who've been here today, who have already signed up, and I have had more registrations, and I expect that those will also come in over the time. Before we go, until we get to there, let's just get right into it. So let's start with this. And I just want to point out the fact that you probably already know this, but actuaries do have quite a lot of responsibility. So here's a little bit of research that I did, and this is for the United States. And actually in the North American market, you can see that in the North American market for life and annuity insurance, there are assets in cash around $4 trillion. In the property and casualty, there are about almost $2 trillion of assets under management for those companies. Now, how does that relate to the actuaries? Well, there are 30,000 SOA actuaries and about 8,000 CAS actuaries. And again, I'm just doing sort of a rough estimate of what this might mean. But that would mean then actuaries are responsible, each one of them, for between 130 and $212 million. So that can seem pretty intimidating. And in fact, it could be, but the whole point is that actuaries generally are doing quite a lot because we seem to be very important when it comes to those insurance companies and those insurance entities that we support. So let me give you a little bit of a background about me before we jump into all of this. My name, as I said before, is Stefan Mathis. I have been a fellow of the Society of Actuaries from the North America since 2008. I've been working in the actuarial world since 2001. Yes, it took me 7 years, as it takes most people a fair amount of time to get my fellowship in that actuarial society. Through that time, I've worked both for a direct insurer and a reinsurer. I've been in various elements. I've been in things like pricing. I've been in reporting. I've done a fair amount working with actuarial modeling systems. So again, forecasting for cash flow testing and for those pricing elements. I've worked in lots of different products. I've worked in individual life insurance. I've worked in some group products as well. I have been a volunteer with the Society of Actuaries. I've been a project oversight group member. I've been evaluation actuary speaker. I've been an exam grader, and I don't have any roles with the Society of Actuaries right now, but I'll be getting back into that soon. My current role is with the chief is a chief product evangelist at Slope Software, who is hosting this today. And in fact, that role is a little bit unique. You don't find many actuaries that are doing things in the software space. And so my role is essentially to combine a lot of the actuarial knowledge that I have from that experience with the information that we want to make available to the actuaries in the audience. So I do a lot of marketing, but I don't really have to say marketing when I talk to somebody, because I feel like I get to keep my integrity, and I don't have to admit that that's what I'm doing. But that's a lot of what I'm doing, is basically telling the story of Slope Software. And so with that, let's come to the idea of, where is this information coming from? So these are the actuaries that are on staff at Slope. So we've got myself, we've got Amy Winnett, she's an FSA. We got Andy Smith, he's an FSA, and we've got Andy Montez, he is an FSA. So together, we have over 90 years of experience working as actuaries, working with software, working with various products, working with various processes. We have worked all across the world. We have experience in North America and in Europe. We have 5 languages on the team. So this is a pretty broad group. And what we were doing is discussing earlier in the year, what are some of the challenges that actuaries have? And from those discussions, we gleaned out 13 different insights that we're going to present to you today. And we'll also talk a little bit about some of the ways, at least one of the ways, that we think those actuaries can meet some of those challenges. So this is not me, this is not even an SOA thing, but it is, insights that are coming from real direct and on the ground experience working with actuary processes and software and technology and tools. So what are we going to do? We're going to go through, I just already given the introduction, so we got that one checked off. We don't have to worry about that anymore. We're going to talk about those modern actuarial challenges. And in fact, I've broken them up into 3 different types of challenge, and we'll get into that in a minute. I will give you a potential solution for some or all of them, and we will then talk about I have opportunity for questions, and we can then talk about next steps. And you'll have to apologize, I will apologize a little bit. You'll see me looking off because I have my second screen set up over there. I want to make sure that I'm looking at the right thing at the right time. I don't want to get out of order. So if you see me looking that way, it's not that I'm ignoring you, it's that's where the good stuff is. So, as I said before, we've defined these challenges into 3 different areas. We think that the challenges are related to business. That's the first area. It's related to the actuarial work. That's the second area. And we think that the last area of challenges is related to the actuarial work, but it's not the actuarial work itself. So I'm calling those actuarial adjacent challenges. So if we dive in and we talk about business challenges, I think most actuaries would relate to this very first one. Everybody feels like they are too busy and they don't have enough time to do the things they want to do. I hear this from actuaries all the time. Yeah, we would love to do more of an analysis. I would love to have the numbers sooner so that I could provide a better explanation to somebody else. But who just has the time? We're so busy getting everything done that we can't really focus on making it better. And that's what these gentlemen in the illustration are dealing with. They're so busy dragging their cart that they don't feel like they can stop for a minute and replace the wheels, when we all know that it would be a much better situation for them to have those wheels instead of the squares. So that's the first challenge, and I think most actuaries would be able to relate to that. A second challenge is that, let's get this to advance. Many times people feel like there's no budget. Like, obviously feel like things are tight and every dollar already has to be accounted for. And if you wanted to do something better, let's say you did have some time and you wanted to make something work better, what if you have to buy something? Do you have to hire a consultant to do that, to implement it? Do you have to buy a piece of technology? Do you have to buy something else? And you feel constrained on the fact that there are many things that you want to do, but there's just no funding for it. Another challenge could be the fact of product diversity. And so I put up here this question: is this the insurance industry's Cambrian explosion? So you probably understand from evolutionary history that millions of years ago, that there was this sudden explosion of the number of animals that existed, and that happened during the Cambrian period. Now, it feels like modern times, we are seeing an explosion of insurance products, annuities with guarantees, insurance products with riders, and just a vast number of opportunities and ways of interacting with the world that probably didn't exist 5, 10, 15, or 20 years ago. The actuary in the 1970s was considering probably term life, whole life, and a payout annuity and a pension. Now you can talk about multi-year guarantee annuities. You can talk about indexed products, indexed UL, variable indexed UL. You've just got so many more different options that it often becomes very difficult for the actuary to keep all of that in their mind and to be able to keep control and understand everything that's part of their portfolio. Another business challenge that we've noticed is the growth of international insurance companies, and it's not necessarily this might not be the challenge that you think it is, but it is because now we have companies which have to work across time zones. We have to work across cultural and language barriers. There might be product differentiation that seems small but ultimately becomes very large. And in fact, there's even regulatory differences and challenges across companies and across countries. So if you had a multinational company that was domiciled in the US, sold business in Australia, and also had operations in the European Union, you could be under multiple different regulatory schemes. You could have different reporting elements and avenues, and you would have to try as an actuary to comprehend all of those different aspects. And at least somebody would have to know which things are going where and how do you account for currency differences? How do you account for times differences? How do you account for reporting and data differences? So again, this modern actuary often has to deal with some of those international companies and those international challenges that just didn't exist when everybody was all together in one company or one jurisdiction, such as the United States or maybe the UK. And the last business challenge is obviously these unprecedented economic times. And the graph that I've got up here it's a little bit off because that horizontal bar is at like something like 10 instead of 0. But this is a graph of the oil prices. This is for West Texas crude delivery for a month out. This is when those economic indicators said that prices had to go negative back in April for oil delivery. That had never happened before. And obviously, that was a consequence of things like the coronavirus pandemic and then the global recession that started afterwards. But again, we're saying that we don't know where things are going to go in the future. This has never happened before. This experience has never happened before. And the combination is just really an uncertain time. So, and it's not just now. It's not just in this month. I expect that this unprecedented situation will be lasting for years, maybe decades. It takes so long to see the impacts of economic shifts that it's going to take a while for us to have a good feeling for what does this really look like and how is it going to impact insurance companies, how is it going to impact consumers, how is it going to impact the general economy and the investment market. We're just really uncertain on all of the different things that could come in the future. So those are the business challenges that actuaries are having to face. We do recognize that actuaries have to face some actuarial challenges too. And the first one that we put up here is they either have ancient tools or none at all. Because many of the actuarial mathematics are very specified, it becomes hard sometimes for there to be an interest in the market in developing a tool to make those actuaries more productive. So actuaries end up with using Excel a lot. They end up with building their own tools, maybe in an R program or they've got a VBA script, or they really just have nothing at all and they are sort of stuck. Or if they do have a software system in place, it's probably 15 or 20 years old. We know of specific people who had systems that hadn't been touched in 10 or 15 years. And I can remember from my own experience when I started in 2001 as an actuary, we were using an older version of a system because they didn't want to pay for the upgrade to the new one. So not only was the system old, it also didn't have the new functionality that we wanted to. Again, for those same challenges from before. We didn't have a budget. We didn't want to take the time to do those conversions or upgrades. So we were stuck with that older tool, and ultimately it got us a poor result because we had less quality risk management, less time to analyze the results and to look at what it was that we wanted to know. Uh, Another challenge is documentation. So, actually, I sat in on an assumption governance webinar from the Society of Actuaries yesterday to learn about what other actuaries are considering, and documentation always seems to be an issue. The question is not just what is the number, but the question is how did you develop that number? How are you sure that you are comfortable with that number? How do you know what the impact of that number is? Who has approved that number? Who has validated that what you said you wanted is clearly in your actuarial model or your actuarial projection? So again, this feels like it is directly related to doing your actuarial work, but it also feels like it detracts from that actuarial analysis that most of us really want to spend our time on. It's such a vital, important part, and yet it can feel like it's detracting. Wouldn't it be great if there were just an automatic data dump from your brain right into that document that said, yep, this is exactly what I'm thinking, this is why, and anybody else can pick it up anytime they want and they can read it, no questions asked? Yeah, that would be lovely. And maybe we can get Elon Musk to work on that kind of a data link. It's not available right yet, but could be in the future. Now, we talked a little bit about before the ancient tools, and in fact, we've considered that the actuarial software, the specialized software that some actuaries use, can be a challenge. Again, because it is a bit of an older system sometimes, it can take a while to learn. And in fact, because there is such an investment in those older systems sometimes, it feels like it isn't keeping up with modern times and modern looks and modern feels. You can see from this graphic that would have been very appropriate, maybe late 90s, early 2000s. And again, this is not from an actual actuarial software, but anybody that is working with any of those today understands that sometimes it feels like it's not really keeping up. It also feels like that because it is so specialized to the actuarial work, and it may not have been designed for an end user in mind, that those traditional actuarial software tools don't really help the user to do what they want to do. It's sort of designed with the programmer in mind, not necessarily designed with the end user in mind. So even though you have some software, maybe it's not very flexible or adaptable to the way that you want to work, to the products that you have. Remember, we had that product explosion that's going on. Maybe the software tool just isn't keeping up. Here's another one that I haven't necessarily seen too much of, but it's becoming very, very clear to me as I talk to more actuaries. And I say I haven't seen it. I haven't seen research on this, what I call an actuarial mindset, but in just general conversations, I know that this is a thing. Now, let's think about it. Actuaries are problem solvers. We want to be problem solvers. We want to solve problems. And in fact, that's probably why we got into the actuarial world, because there was a very clear set of problems that we were supposed to solve. They're all in the exams. You pass the exams by solving the problems. And so you get very good at solving the problems. Also, that may lead you to think that every problem that you see is one that you should solve. Maybe that leads actuaries to take on responsibilities that they shouldn't be taking on in terms of designing a new data pipeline or designing a system or modifying something in a way that really should have been left better to a different professional. The other part of the mindset is that when it takes so long to get your credential, when it takes so long to get to the point where you have a lot of time and money and emotional investment in that process. And maybe you don't want to change. Maybe you don't want to move to something new. Maybe you don't want to try anything else because you're fearing that you are invalidating all of the work that you've done in the past 10 or 20 years to get to the point that you have. Now, I'm not saying that that's true, because in fact, you could consider it as leveraging all those 20 years of experience to get where you are to make the next 20 years even better. But I do think that there is some mindset that is at play when people consider a change to either their actuarial software or to an actuarial system, that maybe the stuff that's already there is a little more attractive than it should be just because it's what you already know. Another actuarial challenge is the fact that, as we've seen over the past 5 to 10 years, big data has shown up. Connections for anything and everything have shown up. And now there are just so many different options for actuaries to either look at data, analytic tools, just again, the volume of opportunities is almost overwhelming and astounding. It's almost impossible to keep up with just the different ways that you can look at the world and the different options that you can use to do so. There are replacements for Excel, which is great. There are different programming languages. I think at last count, I saw something like over 700 programming languages that are available. Obviously, we know that there are a few that are pretty popular for actuaries, such as R, Python, and SAS. Excuse me. But in terms of just understanding what's available, there are so many options that it just becomes almost overwhelming. And you can't keep up and you can't really know what's best or even what's good enough. So that does certainly become a challenge. And then the last challenge for the actuaries is what we're calling the career path of the future. And this is not just us, this is even the Society of Actuaries, or professional society, is recognizing that there are starting to become viable alternatives to some lower level actuarial work. Data scientists, software engineers, and data engineers, they are really creating opportunities to look at some of the analysis that actuaries do and have traditionally done with their own simplistic tools of Excel databases and PowerPoints and pivots, and looking at their programming languages. And there are really challenges for how do you develop that next level thinking. We all can, at least I can remember, and many people that would be in a similar situation as me could remember, you start as a junior actuary, maybe you're an actuarial student, and really all you're doing is just running some reports. You might be copying some data and might be looking for an outlier here or two, but you really didn't have a lot of responsibility. But that was okay, because working on those simplistic reports gave you an opportunity to learn the business. It gave you a chance to understand the ways that you would relate to other actuaries and to other business units. Well, if we do a lot of the work to automate many of those reports, which I think is a good thing, if we automate much of the analysis, which again is a good thing because we're taking away the time from data number crunching to data analysis, where do those actuaries of the future develop their skills? How do they get that intuition that they need? How do they learn different products? How do they learn different ways of interacting with the world without that practice? So that career path of the future means that it is uncertain. Where do you go from here? Where do actuaries go that are either entering right now or that maybe in their mid-career? What looks next? How do they compete with the people who are coming in and have different programming languages? Or how do they compete with data scientists who can do the same sort of multivariable regression analysis? So the career path of the future is fairly unknown, and it's changing all the time, it feels like. Those are all of the actuarial challenges that we had come up with and we wanted to talk about. So then there are last two challenges are what we call actuarial adjacent. So they're not in the actuarial work, but they're right next to it. The first one is what we're calling data pipelines. So doing that actual work requires some other stuff before. Often it's extracts, transform, load, or ETL processes. Maybe you have run some actuarial work and you want to compare some results to a previous run. Well, now how do you aggregate those results? How do you look and make that comparison? How do you evaluate your sensitivities? Is it all right in there in that same situation? Or are you copying and pasting or putting things here or doing those manual processes? So that's the data pipeline that is an actuarial challenge. And then the last one is what we call workarounds, because if you think back to the product explosion, if you think back to the actuarial mindset of wanting to solve problems, something comes up and an actuary often says, hey, I need this and I have this. So how do I get from what I have to what I need? Well, the actuary often tries to build the bridge. They try to do it themselves because they want to solve the problem. They know what's needed and what they have, and they figure, well, I can do that. I can take that on. So maybe they create a workaround. Maybe this is an external spreadsheet. Maybe it's a database. Maybe it's even an automated process, and it takes almost no time, but it's still there. And it's a thing that gets added into the process, and it's a thing that gets, it becomes part of the system when it really wasn't intended to be, or perhaps it hasn't been validated appropriately. But the biggest thing is that it just adds one more part from getting from what you want to what you need. And the whole thing is that, again, actuaries may not have been the right people to make that intermediate step. And there may have been a better way to get from what you want, from what you have to what you want, because maybe you should have gone a little bit earlier in the process and gotten the data there. So I do have this other question. I want to ask, did we do this to ourselves? And let me explain my thinking here. I ask, did we as actuaries create this problem where we have been too good at what we do that we then don't get a chance to do that? And it looks like this. Suppose you're an actuary working in, say, the early 2000s, and you think, hey, there's a great new opportunity. We want to create some new products. Well, we think that there's a market for X, Y, and Z, so let's go ahead and try that product expansion. You're working with the marketing team, you're working with the IT team, sales team, administration. Everybody thinks it's great. Uh, well, in order to make this product happen, you realize, oh gosh, I don't have any time because I'm doing all of the other things that I had to do for the products that were in force and the policies that were in place from the last 50 years. I'm a little too busy. Maybe I need some help. And so I want to have some additional software. But you found that software was insufficient to handle what you needed, again, because you have new products that software wasn't designed for. Well, if I need to go get a new software, if I need to go get something else, maybe it's a new tool, maybe I need to get a consultant, but I don't have any budget. Well, what am I going to do? Well, I'm just going to get it done. I'm an actuary. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to figure out this thing. I'm going to stay up late. I'm going to work on the weekends, and I'm just going to power through, because that's what I remember from my actuarial exams. There was a thing there at the end, and I powered through and I got it. So I got it done. Well, that's great, but I had to do some workarounds in order to make it happen. And it did give me a little bit of free time ultimately. But what happens after that? When you have free time, what do they say? Hey, you have free time. Let's make another product. And we ultimately get into this cycle, perhaps, that doesn't really ever get us to where we want to be. Because as good as we actuaries are and can be at problem solving, at designing those insurance systems, ultimately, we may have brought this upon ourselves. So something to think about. So I would like to have you give me a quick update in the chat. What do you think are the top 3 challenges affecting you? And you can just type them in the numbers there. So do you think that they are business challenges, whether you are too busy, you don't have a budget, you're dealing with too many different products, international divisions, maybe it's the economy? Do you think that the challenges for you are actuarial? Maybe that you don't have the right tools, that you have challenge is always making sure your documentation. Maybe your software is too hard to learn, and so you just don't do it well enough. Maybe you have the mindset. Maybe it's too much data. Maybe it's even the career path. You just don't see where you're going to go. Or maybe the last parts that you're struggling with are data pipelining or that workaround idea. And take a moment, please, and put something in the chat just to give me a little bit of feedback on what you're thinking. Thank you, Cedric. Budget and the career path. Okay, it's curious. All right. Keith, 1, too busy, documentation, career path. Curious about that. Great, thank you. Thank you for that feedback. And okay, I see 2, no budget, actual ancient tools, even the workarounds. Okay, so some of these things are resonating with you. Thanks, Todd. International expansion and the economy. Okay, great. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for your feedback, for all of you. And again, I think it's pretty clear that what we see is not necessarily what everybody else sees, and what other people see is not necessarily what we see. But to hear that you have at least some of the similar resonance, that makes me feel pretty good. Makes me feel like we're pretty close in line. So let me ask this other question then. Let me ask the next question. Is there a magic pill? Is there one thing that could solve all the problems? Probably not, but I think we're going to try. And that's where we're going to introduce this idea of modern actuarial software. So modern actuarial software for modern actuarial challenges. What would modern actuarial software look like? Essentially, we're thinking about anything that is built on what we call modern technology. So around 2010 and later. And it also may incorporate things like modern software design. So what do you think would that would that modern software need to have? Obviously, it would need to have native support for the things that actuaries do. We definitely think that if it's modern technology, it's probably going to be cloud based. If it's designed well, it's going to have things like a shorter learning curve and easy integration. Some of the then extra things that might be a little bit more like nice to have. You would want to have version control. The access anywhere is the software as a service type. You might want to have fast access for support for opportunities to do that. So if we then compare the modern actuarial software with traditional actuarial software, these are some of the different things that you would see. So again, native support for actuarial processes, that's going to happen both ways. But when we get down into some of the other elements, maybe for a short learning curve, anybody that's worked with some traditional actuarial software would say, no, it takes quite a long time to get into that. In fact, if you go down almost at the bottom, the low tech overhead, no, traditional actuarial software does not have that. In fact, I can remember having to install a specific compiler on my machine as part of a 13-page instruction packet in order to get the software installed on my machine before I could even use it. That's not a very low overhead for technology. And I'll even give you a little bit of an example. I'll preview an example in terms of fast turnaround for access and support. We know that traditional actuarial software has not had that, and I'll have a little bit more detail about that later. So Cedric has a good question. How much time do you spend fighting internal IT infrastructure and they won't let you do it? Yeah, exactly. So that's another challenge, and we can probably talk about that a little bit later. I definitely want to come back to that and talk. Does the modern actuarial software solve modern actuarial challenges? Obviously, like we said before, there's no magic pill. Sometimes, and most of the time, modern actuarial software would solve those challenges. Look, we can't do anything about the economics of the situation. We can only adapt to what is available to us. But if you look, like, modern software is going to handle product diversity, it's going to handle much of the automated documentation in terms of what is the value and when was it changed, what was it before, what does it tie to. We can do some of that with modern tools. Even when we get into some of the other elements, like large data sets, absolutely, we can handle lots of elements of data. We can avoid many of those workarounds by designing the system in a way that makes it much more accessible for the user. Can't really do much about the career path, though. That's, again, admission that we're not everything and we aren't going to be able to solve everything. That might be more of the professional society or your local actuarial group could give you some ideas there, or even some mentorship with people who have been there before and they've had to work through that. I do want to take a few minutes and give you a quick case study of a client of ours who had a traditional actuarial system, and then they were able to move to a modern actuarial system. This is Dwayne McGraw of Funeral Directors Life Insurance. They are a U.S.-based carrier of pre-need insurance, and they sell across the nation, and they've got people in every different city and every different state. They had an old historical actuarial system. It took them 2 weeks to run through a whole pricing cycle, which was essentially because they had so many different manual steps and manual processes within there. This is something that Dwayne inherited from a previous actuary when he took over. In order to make this happen, Dwayne had to run a program, then he had to get the output from that program. Then he had to do things like go into a text file and manually change a header piece of information on that text file and save it again. Then he had to upload that into a system. Then he had to run the system. Then he had to take the results out of that system and combine them with other results. And it took 2 weeks in order to run a turnaround for this. Now, Dwayne didn't feel like this was the appropriate way to do his modern business, so he started investigating some alternatives. In fact, he contacted his current vendor and asked them how much time and money it would take in order to upgrade their system so that he could get rid of some of these processes. And they got back to him in 4 months with an answer that it would be about twice as much as he was paying for the license in order to modify that to get him just a small change for it. So again, now he's in the challenge of it took way too long and it's going to cost way too much in order to get something new. So he started looking around for an alternative, and he found Slope. using this modern actuarial system. In fact, Dwayne had it in place and he had it in production before that alternative or his historical carrier, his historical vendor had even responded. So in that 4 months time frame, he had started with Slope, seen a proof of concept, and gotten models running, and he was getting results. And the dramatic change is that he turned his 2 week cycle down to 4 hours. So now somebody can ask him a question, say, hey, Dwayne, what would it be if we raised that rate by a quarter percentage? Or what if we had 25% more males and this distribution for the other older ones? Dwayne can now turn this around in 4 hours instead of 2 weeks. That's a 95% reduction in his time by moving to a modern actuarial software. And you can read more about Dwayne on our website. We've got a full case study written up for him. You can look for him, and you can even talk to me about that. Oh, now is a good time. I want to ask if anybody has any questions, and I want to come to anything that you have. So thank you, Cedric, for what's in the chat. Your question was, how much time do you spend fighting internal IT infrastructure? They won't let you do it. So I'm going to guess that this question is, you want to do something, you as the actuary want to do something, and then your internal IT team says, nope, we have some limits and restrictions on that. That is clearly a challenge that many actuaries are going to deal with, because you, in your mind, have something that is much better, and they are the gatekeepers, and they feel like they have to protect you because there's protection of data, there's protection of access, there's protection of secured information about policyholders. Definitely there's internal information that doesn't want to get out to other competitors or to other nefarious people. Clearly you want to be able to protect that. So if I can interpret your question a little bit, how much time do you spend fighting that? Well, with a modern actuarial system, with one like Slope or something else, you might have zero time fighting with those internal IT people, because at least where we are, it's software as a service. So you log on to a website and all of your information is there. So you don't have any internal servers. You don't have any internal IT resources dedicated to making sure that you're always up and you're always running. You don't have any internal storage. It could significantly remove a lot of that headache. So I hope that answers your question. And if you want to have more, little bit more detail, please put another comment in that chat. And I do see that it says that a couple of people are typing, so I'll give a minute to allow that to come through. Discuss the challenges related to life and health business. I mean, clearly, health insurance business right now, we are completely unknown of what the coronavirus and the COVID-19 is going to do. Yes, there's going to be some, there has been some, minimization of immediate claims because people have delayed something like many, what do we call them? Optional surgeries or healthcare, which has pushed things away from the last 6 months, maybe into the next 6 months or the next year. We don't know what those knock-on effects are going to be, and how delaying those certain elements of care impacts things that show up in 2021, 2022, 2023. So the question, why not just use R and push for widespread sharing of code packages? Other data science style problems. Cost reduced to zero with cybersecurity fees only. That's a great option. The question is, do you want to build it in R? There are some things that can happen with R. You can maintain those packages. Again, it's open source, and so you can have lots of people that are going to be validating that. We don't feel like actuaries should be spending a lot of time building those packages in R or in any other language. They should be essentially consumers of what has been done well for them. So, I mean, it's a great question I think that there is a position and there is a place for things like R, for things like Excel in the actuarial work. When you come to putting things into a production environment where you want it to run under a lockdown situation, when you want it to be auditable, when you want it to be visible to various different entities, there aren't going to be as many people who are going to understand R and the coding that goes into that. Perhaps your regulators, perhaps your other business professionals, maybe it's your finance team or your IT team, they might not understand what you've done. And so being able to explain it may become a challenge as well. Okay. So using packages created by others will make the actuaries need to replicate the results back on Excel to prove that is right. Yeah. So we do have that. And that does become a thing where Excel becomes a nice validator, or it becomes an investigative tool for the actuaries to reproduce what was done in their actuarial system. And again, I think that there is a great place for Excel to be used. I know that in my experience, Excel itself, there's positives and negatives, right? You can do anything you want in Excel. The problem is you have to do everything. You essentially start with a blank slate, and you have to trust that you've gotten all the components into that reserve calculation, for example, that are necessary in order to be able to understand all the different components. When you start with a commercially available system, you can that some people have already gone through and they've done that process. They've given you probably the first 85 to 90% of what you need. And then that last little bit of tweaking would be to take what is available for everybody and apply it specifically to your type of products or your type of process. Great. So thank you for those questions. Thank you for those that discussion. I appreciate that. So I want to talk next, and I want to give you a challenge. So you gave me some questions. I want to give you a challenge. I want to ask you this question: do you have a modern actuarial system? And the question is, how would you know whether or not you did? So we've developed what we call a risk quiz. This is 10 multiple choice questions. I'm going to send this to everybody afterwards, so that you have an opportunity to take this and figure out, what are some of the things that I might look for in a modern actuarial system. And here's a hint: it's not just the system that is at risk. It's also the people who are using it. There might be some risks with the people who are maintaining the systems, developing the systems, etc. So I'm going to send that to you after this webinar. But then the next question becomes, what are the next steps? So I'm going to send you this risk quiz. I hope that you'll take it. You'll take a look at your system. You'll answer it clearly for maybe yourself, for your department, for your company as a whole. Uh, we're going to have another webinar. As I said before, in October. It's going to be the end of October. We're going to have an open forum. So less of a me present and more of a conversation and discussion. I would encourage you to spread the word. Tell other people about what you've heard today, or tell other people about that open forum and invite them. I will encourage you, if you're interested in seeing what Slope looks like, you can get a demonstration, and we'll have a link on our last page that will show you how you can get that demo set up. I would encourage you to like and subscribe. This is a modern company. This is the modern world. We do have a LinkedIn profile, and we do have our blog, which we provide updates very regularly. And I would encourage you to consider the blog, even if you don't think you're interested in Slope software itself, because the blog is all about being a better actuary and taking some concepts from either software as a service ideas, or good programming, or good business, and applying them to actuarial work. This is, I think, something that can help any actuary at almost any level, because it's going to be more fundamental, and it's about how do you get better at being that actuary. So we are right about out of time. I wanted to go for 45 to 50 minutes and give you a little bit of time afterwards. I will just say thank you for your participation, for your interest, and for attending today. I wish you all of the best. So if you want to see more, or if you want to have a demo, you can visit slopesoftware.com, and you can click around and find the demo page on our website. And I will have links to that, anything and available in the emails that follow up. So, and again, you can look for me on LinkedIn if we're not already connected. Thank you for participation, and I will see you again. Great. Bye-bye.